How does the Jets' offensive line look? What can we do about this run defense? What's the best alignment for Jets wide receivers? We'll discuss all of this and more on today's mailbag edition of the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Wednesday, September 21st, 2022, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com, thanking you for making the show your first listen or your first watch every day. This podcast is free, and it's available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you like what you see or hear, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening. You'll never miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please give the episode a big thumbs up. It helps the podcast out, and it helps other Jets fans find Locked On Jets. Today, our episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Today, we have our weekly mailbag show. Each Wednesday, we try and do a mailbag. Of course, sometimes events occur that force us to change that plan, but this week we have our mailbag at its regularly scheduled time. Thanks to everybody who sent in questions, and let's begin. Our first question is about the Jets' offensive line from Joe. Joe writes, how did the Jets' offensive line play overall? Did anybody play particularly well or particularly poorly? Well, I think the offensive line's kind of a tale of two stories right now, because the answer is very different depending on whether you're talking about the interior guys or the tackles. Now, I think Laken Tomlinson is maybe the one exception on the interior, because at left guard, he had a horrible first game against Baltimore. And he, I think, bounced back a little bit against Cleveland. And I know the question was probably about the Cleveland game, but I'm going to give a more general answer, because I think the interior guys are holding up reasonably well. Connor McGovern, who last year was my player of the year for the Jets, I think is playing reasonably well. I think Elijah Vera Tucker's taking a big step forward this year. I've been really impressed by what I've seen from Elijah Vera Tucker, and I'm excited. And listen, we all know, you trade up in the first round for a guard, it better be like a Pro Bowl caliber guard. I'm not ready to put Elijah Vera Tucker in the Pro Bowl yet, but he's having the kind of year you want him to have. He needs to take a big step forward. Last year, he was okay for a rookie, but we are grading on a curve there. Okay for a rookie means that you got to improve a lot year two. And so far, through 2 games, keep your fingers crossed, Elijah Vera Tucker looks really good. So I think the interior guys look solid for the Jets. Tackle's another story. Now, 2 different stories here. One is George Fant, a guy the Jets were counting on. And I understand Fant has been kind of moved around. He started at left tackle. Then Mekhi Becton gets hurt. And the Jets signed Dwayne Brown. So Fant has to go back to right tackle. And then for Dwayne Brown, somehow, still can't figure out when this guy had time to get hurt, but somehow Dwayne Brown gets hurt. So the Jets have to move Fant back to left tackle. Now, I understand this, but Fant was signed a couple of years ago in part because of his ability, in theory, to play both positions. And here's the other thing. Much has been made of the quality play Fant produced in 2021. Well, he was playing left tackle, but they moved him over there during a game. This wasn't like he had the full training camp to prepare at left tackle. He spent the entire training camp preparing to play right tackle. Then in the second half of the first game, he had to move over there on the fly. So I don't know that he's really got a lot of excuses. Now, this was a tough matchup. Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, not an easy matchup. Yeah, but Fant is off to a bad start this year. Fant looks like the guy who really struggled for much of his career, the Seattle years and that first year with the Jets. He looks a lot more like that George Fant than the 2021 George Fant. I think he's struggling a lot. And listen, we know Fant has never been a strong run blocker. That's not his game. He's really more of just a pure pass protector. It is not going well. And listen, part of it we know, again, last week in particular was a real mismatch for George Fant. But this is part of the problem. Do you really want a left tackle long-term who's just okay? I think that's something you got to consider when you think about Fant long-term. Or do you want a left tackle you can count on? Do you want to try and find a left tackle you can count on? That's a challenge. Max Mitchell, I mean, look, it's a struggle. I think anybody who's watching this now, there is this theory out there that Max Mitchell's playing great. Max Mitchell's not playing great. I have to tell you, I don't blame Max Mitchell for not playing great because Max Mitchell was not drafted to play this year. You don't typically draft a guy in the 4th round because you're ready to put him into the lineup. And we know when he was drafted, the 2 starting tackles were Fant and Becton. Well, Becton gets injured. Now the Jets have an option. Do they want to put the rookie 4th rounder in a tackle? Do they want him starting? Well, what do they do? They go out and they pay Dwayne Brown, around $9-10 million a year. You don't do that if you're confident in Max Mitchell that he's ready to start right away. You don't do that. And then, of course, Dwayne Brown, I guess, when he went out to lunch or something, somehow got hurt. Again, nobody's given us the story on what's going on with Dwayne Brown. But I'm going to try and avoid going off on tangents on Dwayne Brown. But I'm still very confused about what happened there. How this guy could sign for this amount of money and then never take the field for the Jets. But it forces Max Mitchell into the lineup. And you can see why Max Mitchell wasn't supposed to play this year. He's just not physically there yet. I mean, he's getting pushed around. He's getting shoved around. He's got to hit the weight room. And I think this year was really about him building that strength, about him, hitting the weight room, building that upper body strength, because he's kind of getting shoved around. Now, he's showing good effort. I mean, he's trying hard. And he's not a total disaster. I mean, I don't think he's as bad as, Connor McDermott was last year. I think he's a little bit better than Connor McDermott. I think you can make a case he's better than Chuma Edoga. But it's a struggle. I mean, I think people are not noticing him, so they're assuming he's playing pretty well. But, I mean, he's getting thrown around. That ball, I'm going back to the Baltimore game, but, I mean, he was on the ground a lot. I mean, he was getting thrown to the ground a lot. It's been a struggle for Max Mitchell. It's what you would expect from a 4th-round rookie who was really drafted as a developmental player. It's not Max Mitchell's fault. I'm not getting on Max Mitchell. I'm not criticizing him, but he's playing about at the level you would expect a 4th-round rookie. Maybe a little bit better. Again, he has a few moments where he looks like he's hanging in there, but it's an issue. And you hope Dwayne Brown... Listen, we don't know when Dwayne Brown's going to be back. If the Jets get Dwayne Brown back, you would think... Now, listen, I don't even know what's going on with the guy, so maybe not. But on paper, this should be a pretty decent line. And on paper, I think the interior is holding up, aside from that disaster start for Tomlinson against Baltimore. But other than that, I think the interior of the line's holding up well. The issues are on the perimeter. And that's not exactly what you want to hear because this is Jets line, the Jets run game that's supposed to be based on perimeter running. Now you do have some backs who can maybe help you compensate for that, but I think how's the line playing? Well, it depends on whether you're talking about the tackle position or whether you're talking about the guards in the center. Guards and center I think are doing okay, and Elijah Vera Tucker's looking really promising. Tackles, not so much. Max Mitchell maybe next year, maybe 2 years from now could be a player, but it's not working so well, and I think Fant's off to a bad start. Our next question, I'm concerned about the run defense. I still think this is going to be the number one problem for the Jets this year. Linebackers and safeties have not looked good. Also, a little concerned about the pass rush, but I think that will get better. What can be done from here about it? I mean, not a lot. I just don't think it's a priority for the Jets. And Robert Saleh's been pretty vocal about it, that he prioritizes defending the pass first. And the Jets were awful against the pass against Cleveland, and they had some bad plays against Baltimore as well. They gave up 3 long touchdowns in the passing game. And to be honest with you, in today's NFL, that's not necessarily the wrong approach. I've been really annoyed through the years how the Jets have focused more on slowing down the run on defense. And the thing is, outside of last year, outside of Saleh's arrival, even when the Jets have been at the bottom of the league, they've had an elite run defense, and it really hasn't done them any good. Now, listen, I'm not saying I want to get gashed in the run. I want to have an elite run defense, but not at the expense of pass defense. And I'd rather be, if I can only stop one, I want to stop the pass, because this is a passing league. So what can they do? There's not really a lot of great personnel solutions. I mean, when you're talking about building the defensive line, as I said, Saleh is focused on guys who can get after the quarterback. Saleh is not focused on those big space-eating run stoppers. I think the one move maybe they can make is Quan Alexander playing over Quincy Williams, because Quincy Williams is off to a really rough start this season. And I know people are, there's this mindset the Jets are a 4-3 defense. The Jets really are a 4-2-5 defense. Today's NFL, you're playing 3 receiver sets more often than not. And that means when you play a 4-man defensive line, you're only playing 2 linebackers. And right now, if you're looking at the playing time allocation, Quincy Williams is the number 2 linebacker. He's the guy who's not coming off the field. And when the Jets take the third linebacker off the field, Quan Alexander's the guy coming off. And I think Quan Alexander's been better than Quincy Williams so far. I do not think Quincy Williams is taking the step forward the Jets thought he would take this year. And Quan Alexander's gotten a decent amount of playing time the first 2 weeks because they've played 2 teams that used multi-tight end sets a lot. So you're seeing more 4-3 than you're going to see going forward. But now you're going to face these teams with more conventional offenses with 3 receiver sets. So you're only going to play 2 linebackers. I think that's one area the Jets can help themselves. But outside of that, I don't really know that they have great personnel for stopping the run. I think to the extent they're going to be able to stop the run, it's got to be on the defensive line, penetrating, getting upfield, making plays in the backfield. Because this is not a read and react. It's just not a read and react kind of defense where you're going to have guys eating space, tying up blockers. You need guys to get up and make plays. So you need Quinnen Williams. You need Sheldon Rankins. Sheldon Rankins, who I thought played pretty well on Sunday. You need those guys getting upfield and, the defensive ends holding the point of attack. I'm sorry, not holding. Defensive ends getting upfield as well, not holding the point of attack. I just said defense not holding the point of attack. You need those guys to make plays. That's really what it comes down to. But I think personnel-wise, the team's built as it is. It's not a team built around great run stopping. It's a team that's built around stopping the pass. It's what the defense is built, and they need to do that better as well. So I don't know that there are simple answers. I think that your most basic answer is defensive line, make plays. Quan Alexander maybe a little bit over Quincy Williams, but there aren't many great personnel solutions. Now, ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we will continue this weekly mailbag episode. We will talk about the wide receiver position. How should the Jets deploy their players? I'll tell you what I think as we continue on this Wednesday mailbag. Of course, this is a new Jets roster this year. The Jets spent plenty of money in free agency over the course of the offseason. They also drafted a number of players. It's pretty easy for the Jets to find new players. But if you're a small business owner and you want to find new employees, it's a little bit more difficult. And you're gearing up for fall right now. You need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. Well, LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job in the purple #hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Mailbag Wednesday. Thank you for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Our next question: how did the Jets primarily deploy their receivers on Sunday? Was one of the receivers spending most of the time in the slot, or was there a rotation? And is this the way the Jets should go? It's a little bit complicated because Braxton Berrios, when he was in there, was mostly playing in the slot. And I think roughly he matched what he did last year. Last year, Braxton Berrios and Jamison Crowder were guys who were more 75% slot, maybe around 25% outside, and Berrios kind of matched that. Aside from that, though, the Jets were kind of rotating guys in and out of the slot. And we know, listen, it's almost a cliche at this point. Mike LaFleur came from the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers have used the slot as a rotational place where they move guys in and out. They try and create matchups. And they even will put fullbacks in there. They'll put tight ends in there. The Jets were moving guys in and out of the slot. And in some ways, you wonder whether it was to their detriment because Garrett Wilson spent a fair amount of time in the slot. But he did most of his damage on the outside. Based on, and we need to see more data to make definitive statements here, but based on what Garrett Wilson did on Sunday, I think you may just want to stick him on the outside and let him go to work there. And Elijah Moore last year, Elijah Moore's off to a bit of a slow start this season. Last year, and it was really funny because this time last year, everybody was going crazy because Elijah Moore was not playing more in the slot because everybody sees this smaller receiver. Last year, Elijah Moore did a lot of his damage outside. He was more productive outside than he was in the slot. So maybe Corey Davis is the guy who should play in the slot a little bit more. It's difficult to say, and we're only 2 games in. And I do think, in theory, Garrett Wilson can really thrive in the slot for the Jets. So maybe it's one of those things you go based on the matchups. I kind of go back and forth on this because he did so much damage on the outside, and really that's where he went to work the most. But I do think he's got the skill set. You put him in the slot maybe on like a 3rd and 5. You let him run an option route. I mean, his route running skills, he'll be able to pick it up for you. And we've seen Cooper Kupp can be a dynamic. We've seen Cooper Kupp. He's a dynamic receiver out of the slot. He can make big plays out of the slot. But I keep going back to how good he was on the outside. So maybe, I don't know, Corey Davis on the outside is your solution. It's an interesting question what the Jets should do there. Now, I don't think they really have the tight ends at this point to create mismatches in the slot. I mean, I think on paper the tight ends should be okay. I mean, you should get more. Listen, I crushed Conklin yesterday. If you watched or listened to yesterday's show, I was very critical of Tyler Conklin, and Tyler Conklin deserved every piece of criticism I gave him. I do think he could get better after these first 2 games, but I don't know that the Jets have a lot of mismatches they can create at the tight end position from the slot. So I think it's those receivers, but I believe right now where I'd probably go is Corey Davis more in the slots. And, Berrios goes in as needed. When somebody gets tired, Berrios will play the slot. But I like Wilson on the outside. I like Moore on the outside. Yeah, you can slide them inside occasionally. And listen, in today's NFL, we're not talking about guys who are playing that spot 100% of the time. It's going to be like what I mentioned with Berrios, where he's 75% in the slot, 25% outside. That's really the way the Jets did it last year. So even when I'm saying somebody plays the outside, they're going to have their moments in the slot, like those 3rd and 5s I'm talking about with Wilson, where he can run a good option route, or when you try and get him a mismatch. But I think for the most part, Wilson outside, Moore outside, and then, figure it out otherwise. Our next question, how do you think Jets linebackers have been playing through 2 games? Is the Mosley, Alexander, Williams rotation working well? Well, I mentioned my views on Quincy Williams in the first segment, so I will not rehash that, but I think it's been a rough go of it for these linebackers so far. I don't think C.J. Mosley's been great. The best one, I think, has been Quan Alexander so far. I don't think C.J. Mosley's been great, but, we were talking in the last segment about the run defense. The pass defense has been bad. I mean, these guys were struggling in zone coverage, and it's no surprise. I mean, these guys had a rough go of it last year in zone coverage, but especially Quincy Williams and C.J. Mosley. That's where the Browns did a lot of damage. Browns, had a productive day out of the tight end position. Amari Cooper had a big day as a receiver, but a lot of his damage was not done against Sauce Gardner or DJ Reed, both of whom have been excellent so far. A lot of it was done in the middle of the field where the Browns were able to isolate him in the proper zones. Jets need to get better cover linebackers next year. There's nothing that can be done this year about it. I mean, it's just something they're going to have to live with for 2022. It's going to be a weakness, and teams are going to look to exploit it. I mean, they know the scheme the Jets are running. They know how to get the matchups they want, and these linebackers are weak in coverage. And Quincy Williams, we were looking for a jump from him this year. It doesn't look like it's happening. So it's not great. I mean, I think we knew going into the season that the linebacker position was going to be an issue, and it's been an issue. And there's not much more you can say. I think maybe more Quan Alexander can help, but it's not going to fix everything that's wrong with it. It's just something the Jets are going to have to work around on the defensive side of the ball. And, when you can cover on the outside, maybe it makes life a little bit easier on the guys on the inside. If you can get after the quarterback and these linebackers don't have to cover for as long, maybe that's something that you can help work around, but it's just an issue for the Jets. And so is the safety position. And as we continue on this Wednesday mailbag episode of Locked On Jets, we'll talk about what the Jets can do there, because it's another defensive weak spot. The Jets pulled off an upset last weekend. They shocked the Browns. The Browns were favorites by around a touchdown. Now the Jets are home underdogs again this weekend. And you should know, if you want to bet on the game, that BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of the pro football action and your college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all of the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's Week 3 games. BetOnline is also your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. They're the fastest and easiest way to check on all your favorite sports and events. That includes Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and regular golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. This is the Locked On Jets podcast on this Mailbag Wednesday episode. Our next question: is it time for Ashton Davis to replace LaMarcus Joyner? Joyner has really struggled. Davis had the game-clinching interception. What do you think? I got to give Ashton Davis credit because, when I was watching that play live, I thought, well, probably an easy play. He broke on the ball. I mean, he did a great job reading Jacoby Brissett's eyes. He made the interception in the final seconds that sealed the game for the Jets. I mean, he just read the play perfectly. Very un-Ashton Davis-like. A lot of credit to him. Now, I don't think that play saved the game because if you're watching it, DJ Reed is all over Amari Cooper. He's in perfect position to break the pass up. So I don't think the Jets would have lost the game if Ashton Davis. I don't think it wouldn't consider it a game-saving play, but it was still an excellent play by Ashton Davis. He was in the middle of the field. Essentially, his job was to take that pass away, and he did it. And he covered a lot of ground. Should the Jets replace LaMarcus Joyner with Ashton Davis? I mean, this is just one of those situations where there's no good option. And I see this every year. We saw this a week ago when people wanted to put Mike White in for Joe Flacco. Sometimes you just don't have a good option. And sometimes the options are all equally likely to surprise you. Like last week, people, and I was kind of up in the air myself because I did not think there was a good option. But ultimately, I think the odds of Mike White playing great or Joe Flacco playing great are probably around the same. And really, for the Jets, the last 2 years, you've gotten one amazing Mike White game and one really good Joe Flacco game. And you never know when to expect it. And, when you're talking LaMarcus Joyner, Ashton Davis, do you have faith in either of these guys? I don't. I don't think either of them is particularly good. So it's one of those things where I can't get upset no matter what they do. I can get upset that these are my options. I can say the Jets did not handle the safety position that well in the offseason. These are my two options. Can I get angry with Robert Saleh if he's playing LaMarcus Joyner over Ashton Davis? I mean, listen, that interception notwithstanding, we've seen what Ashton Davis brings to the table. It's not a lot. Could I get upset with Robert Saleh if Ashton Davis is in there for LaMarcus Joyner? Of course not. LaMarcus Joyner has been terrible. So it's a situation. I think whenever a player struggles, everybody wants there to be an immediate change. But the guys who are backups for a reason. They're usually not better than the starters. So LaMarcus Joyner has been so bad that I don't know that Ashton Davis could be worse. I think you could be justified in making a change just to shake things up because of how bad things have been. But I don't think that's going to fix anything. I think you're probably going to get roughly equal safety play no matter who's out there. Our last question: what happens if the defense is bad this year and the defense ends up worse under Saleh for 2 years than it was under Gase? And on top of that, think about all the players the Jets have drafted and signed in free agency. What does it take to get Ulbrich fired? Is he just implementing Saleh's system and thus is he protected? Is he like Dowell Loggins in that sense? Saleh is too conservative in general on fourth downs. He punts when he's the underdog. I assume there's no way he gets fired after 2 years, is there? So a couple questions there. Now, Saleh's been pretty vocal that he wants to be the head coach of the full football team. So I think he's got similar philosophical beliefs as Jeff Ulbrich. But I think this is the Ulbrich defense. And, I heard you made there's a comparison Gaze and Dowell Loggins. Maybe the comparison's more Todd Bowles, Casey Rogers, because when Bowles was on the Jets, he delegated a lot to Casey Rogers. And there's actually probably a similar dynamic where Bowles would not make a change. And I believe to this day, Bowles put a friendship over what was best for the team because he was friends with Casey Rogers. We'll see what happens. There's still a long way to go, 15 games left, but if the defense doesn't improve and you have all these pieces, last year, I think you can I made excuses for Ulbrich. I think that they were fair because they did not really have the players to implement a quality system. This year should be different. This year they've made a lot of additions. So if the defense doesn't get any better, then I think you do have to look at making a change at coordinator. And it comes down to whether or not, Saleh is going to value a friendship to that extent. Now, as far as will Saleh get fired after 2 years, I don't think so. You can never rule it out. You're always one disaster season away, but I don't think Saleh's job is in any immediate danger. And I think wins like Sunday pretty much take us out, take that discussion away. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. Big shout out to subscribers to the podcast. If you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening. You'll get notifications as new episodes are posted. You'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give the show a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, please a big thumbs up. Both of these help the channel out and helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Have a great Wednesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.